Susie Homesteader of the Rockies, and welcome to the Susie Homesteader channel. And today we're going to do part 4 on our wood stove series. And today we're going to talk about cleaning and seasoning and storing your cast ironware. Hopefully you saw the last video that I did on cooking on a wood stove, which included cast iron and some other kinds of cooking materials. And like I said, today we're just going to kind of focus on how to take care of your cast iron, because it is kind of a little different process than you do with your regular cookware. Obviously there's a couple different kinds of cookware that you can use, whether it's on a wood stove or just on a conventional oven range. Other than like cast ironware, you can get some stainless steel, there's enamel ware, there's Teflon, there's copper. Just about anything other than aluminum. You just kind of want to stay away from aluminum because some of those heavy metals can actually come out of the material itself and get into your system, and that's just not a good thing. But cast ironware has kind of its own little program that we need to figure out how to maintain. And there's a couple different methods for doing this. And really, what you want to start with is if you have some new cast ironware and you've just bought some cast ironware, which should look a little bit more like this, where it's darker and you're not going to see any rust, and it may or may not be seasoned. If you buy brand new cast ironware, it's most likely that it is not seasoned. So what seasoning means is nothing more than making sure that it's been oiled. And these are a couple different examples of the oils that you can use to season your cast ironware. And that's what we're going to kind of go over today. Depending on how old or how new your cast ironware is going to depend on what kind of an oil you're going to use. So, there's some old cowboys that'll just swear by Crisco, by an actual shortening that they like to use. And then, there's something like a coconut oil, which is a little bit more in between the shortening and something like an olive oil. And obviously olive oil being the most lightweight oil that you want to season your cast ironware with. So depending again on how new or how old your cast ironware is, if it's brand new and never been seasoned, you might want to start with something a little bit heavier, like the Crisco. And then if it's something that's already been seasoned and you're really just trying to touch it up, you might want to go with something a little bit lighter in the event that it already has a little bit of oil or seasoning in it. So there's a couple things we got to figure out first. And number one, if it is new, like something like this, even when you take that out of the box or wherever you're going to buy it from, you still want to wash it with a hot soapy water to start with, no matter what's been done to it. So get that cast ironware washed. And the biggest issue with cast ironware is moisture. So moisture is not a friend of iron, and so because of that you have to constantly make sure that there is just no moisture or condensation left on your cast iron. So that's the big trick. Number one is just making sure there's no moisture left on it to enable it to rust. So let's just say you got some new cast ironware, you've washed it, you've kind of dried it off a little bit just so that you can put some oil on it. So what you want to do is, if you have a self-cleaning setting on your oven range, which is usually close to about 500 degrees, you can put your oven on a self-clean setting. And if for some reason your oven doesn't have the self-clean setting, just turn it up to like 450 on bake. And what you're going to do is you're going to take something, you want it like a cookie sheet or just something to set your cast ironware on, because you want to make sure some of that oil doesn't drip off when you're heating it up. So get something like a real large cookie sheet or just some tin foil, and then you're going to take your cast iron and you're going to wipe it out all around the insides and the sides and even the back, every little part of your cast iron. You're going to wipe down with whatever oil you choose to use. And then you want to set it upside down, just, you know, so that you can get all sides of this heated up right. And set it on your cookie sheet or whatever you have in the oven there. And then cook it for, or just kind of let it stay in there for about 2 hours. And then that will kind of help season your cast iron. And like I said, just let that oil stay on there, put as much as you want on there. If you have it on a sheet or something, you don't have to worry about that dripping. So get a cloth, wipe every part of that, leave it in there for about 2 hours, and then turn that off, let it cool before you take it out because it's going to be super, super hot. Either, you know, just use your mitts and take it out and set it somewhere to cool, or just shut your oven off and leave it in there for a while, because it does kind of take a while to cool off. And then take, you don't want to wash it off. Do not wash it, do not wash it, do not wash it. You just want to take something like a, you know, a handy wipe or a soft towel, something kind of other than a paper towel, and just kind of wipe it out of whatever excess oil is still there. You don't want to wipe out all the oil, you kind of want to leave just a little bit of a film of oil on that cast iron. So that's how you're going to season it. And then when you're storing your cast ironware after it's been seasoned, you know, if you live in a place that has a lot of condensation, let's just say like Florida or by the beach, or somewhere where there's constant moisture in the air, I guess one thing that could happen is that you would just start to see some of that develop on your cast iron, and then you're going to get rust. So one little trick you can do for storing your pans, particularly like a Dutch oven, is put something like a rice or a barley in the base of it. Just anything, any kind of a grain, or some kind of a food that will absorb the moisture. So if you think there's a possibility of any kind of condensation getting in any of your stuff, put a little bit of barley or rice or anything you have on hand to absorb that. And then leave the lid cracked a little bit too. Don't put your lids on really tight either, because that's just going to trap the moisture in there. So, you know, it's just trying to prevent this iron from rusting again, and that's the goal. So if you have enough oil, a little bit of that residue left in there, you should be okay. So that's what you're going to do with some new cast ironware. Now, let's just say you have some older or some used cast ironware, like I do, and you can kind of see that this one it was seasoned at one time, but it does need to be re-seasoned. So what we're going to do is try and get basically some of that rust and some of those deposits off of there before we oil it again, before we re-season it. So there's a couple different ways of doing that depending on how much rust you have in your pan or in your cast iron. So this one's really not too bad, but it does need a little help. So there's a couple things you can do, and one is, here's an old grandma's recipe. You just take some salt, or if you can find like a coarser salt, kind of like a kosher salt, or just something as coarse as you can get, take some salt, dump it into the bottom of your pan, and then cut a potato in half and use that potato like a little scrub brush, kind of similar to this kind of an idea. But you're going to use the potato because the starch in the potato helps absorb what we're trying to get out. So you're going to cut your potato in half, and you're just going to literally scrub the bottom of your pan, your cast iron, with the potato and with the salt, and then try and get the sides and anything else where you see that needs to be cleaned. So that's the first way that you can try and clean some of your cast iron. And if that doesn't work, of course, if you have a grinder brush, if it's in really, really bad shape, and you have to really start grinding off some of the rust that's on there, just go get your husband's grinder brush and literally scrape off that rust to start with. That would be your first step in the most extreme case. And then, if it's not as bad as that, you can soak your cast iron in vinegar. Now, this is like a 5% vinegar. I know they make all the way up to a 20% vinegar. which I haven't actually ever used. That might actually be a little too acidic, but this is just your standard grocery store 5% vinegar. You can pour that into just say, you know, the bottom of your pan, if it's just the bottom of it that needs it. But like in this case, you can see this good old Dutch oven. It's all over the sides, on the inside and the outside. So in that case, if you could submerge this whole thing in like a bucket, and you had a couple bottles of that vinegar that you could just pour into that and just kind of leave it in there all day, that's another way to go too. So a couple different ways to remove the rust from your cast ironware. And after you have gotten, again, most of that rust off of there, you want to go back and re-season your cast ironware. And then, of course, storing it, how you store it, is also really important too. So just so long as it stays dry after you've seasoned it, that's the way to go. And then, you know, try to avoid cooking, when you do go back and use your cast iron, try to avoid cooking real acidy foods in there, because that's going to strip out the oil and the seasoning that you've put in there as well. In a Dutch oven in particular, if you cook really liquidy recipes like soups or things that just have a lot of liquid in it, and you're boiling that liquid at some point in your cast iron, that will also kind of strip the seasoning. I know everybody wants to make a pot of beans or some kind of a soup or a stew in their Dutch oven when they're cooking, but that's not really always the best idea for cast iron, because what will happen is you will actually see a little bit of that residue in your food, which I guess if you're not worried about that, it's not a big deal. But you're kind of better off cooking foods like chicken and dumplings, or just something where it's going to absorb some of that liquid, as opposed to the liquid that's in your recipe absorbing your seasoning. So try and avoid those kind of recipes if you can. And then one of the absolute best things that you can cook in your cast iron is bacon, and just because that's a perfect seasoning. So, you know, if you ever take off somebody's, or ever start using somebody's cast iron and it smells like bacon the second you start cooking something else in there, that's probably because they left a little bit of that bacon grease in there, which is exactly what you want to do, because that's, you know, pretty much the equivalent of any kind of these oils that you'd use to season it. So again, if you don't have any of this on hand and you do have some bacon and you want to season it, then use your bacon and just leave a little bit of that bacon grease in there. That's a great one. And then that's about it, really. Just, again, like I said, make sure that you don't leave any water in there. Don't rewash things. I know that sounds gross, but all you really ever want to do is just wipe out whatever you've cooked in there. If you do have a problem where maybe your cast ironware isn't seasoned enough, and you cook something in there and you still have a bunch of residue from that food in the bottom of your cast iron, then go back and take that salt again after you've, emptied out whatever food you had in there, and just use something a little coarser, like an abrasive sponge or one of these kind of softer steel wool type tools, and just kind of scrape out, put that salt in there again and kind of try and scrape out a little bit of that residue. They also make a scraper, to just scrape off some of that stuff. I haven't had a whole lot of success with that. Excuse me, but again, if you can just kind of scrape off whatever big food is on there, and if you wind up taking off some of the oil with it or the seasoning with it, then go back with a soft towel and re-oil it a little bit. You don't have to put it back in the oven every time you think that's getting lighter and lighter. You just really need to season it one super good time in the oven, and then the rest of the time just kind of keep a little bit of a film on there. So hopefully that answered most of your questions about how to maintain your beautiful cast ironware. And there's so many fun pieces that you can acquire over time. You can go to my website and I will have a complete supply list for you of everything you need for your cast iron, and how to clean it and how to store it. And you can also go to my shopping link and look for some of the items that I like to use that go with this. So if you have any questions, come and see me on my website, Susie Homesteader of the Rockies, and we will see you there. Bye-bye.
Oh, Mama, I have got to get me one of these.
let's get started. Subscribe to the Susie Homesteader channel, and we'll see you there. Bye-bye.